Welcome to the Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to our Week 12 edition of our fantasy football segment. We're going to talk about some quarterbacks, some tight ends, and some defenses. I'm your host, Jim Sella. How you feeling to be on the spread today, Dash?
I'm feeling.
Feeling great. You look great. You're smiling today.
Well,
you look happy.
You put the grade in there.
You got a bounce in your step. You're feeling it, dude. You love this fantasy football stuff. You eat, sleep, and breathe fantasy football.
You're dead wrong.
I get messages at like 3, 4 in the morning about all this fantasy stuff. I got to be at work at 5 a.m. This dude's just messaging me all night.
I don't even think I need to talk. You're putting the words in my mouth for me.
Please believe. Well, what are we doing first? Quarterbacks?
Quarterbacks.
All right, what do we got? Must start. Or wait, no. Elite is tier 1. My bad. Don't stab me.
All right, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady. Obviously, we're going to play them all.
Play them all. Nothing to even say there, right?
Not much. Andrew Luck has a great matchup. We can say that. He's going against Jacksonville, so he should be able to blow them up.
If you have one of these guys and you need our advice, you are a moron.
Tier 2, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, and Phillip Rivers this week.
You like Russell Wilson against Arizona?
I do like Russell Wilson against Arizona because he keeps getting it done with his legs every week. His passing numbers haven't been that great over the past 2 or 3 weeks. I don't even think he's been over 200 yards, but he keeps getting it done in fantasy because he gets it done on the ground.
What about Matty Ryan going up against Cleveland? I know Cleveland's not the worst defense in the world, but their defense has trailed off a little bit since the beginning of the year. That's got to be a good matchup.
Actually, I like how Cleveland's defense was playing up until last week, and Matt Ryan's been killing it. Yes, he tailed off a little bit too, actually, as you were saying, like Cleveland's defense was, but Matt Ryan, you got to keep playing him.
Well, what about tier 3? We got Tony Romo, Jay Cutler, Colin Kaepernick, and Matt Stafford.
Yep, Tony Romo going up against New York Giants in New York. They led up the 6th most of fantasy quarterbacks, and he's been killing it. 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions over his last 7 games. He had 279 yards and 3 touchdowns against them in Week 7, so he looks like a great play here. And plus, he's doing good on the road.
Matt Stafford going up against New England at New England. That seems like a tough matchup. New England gives up the 15th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Stafford had 0 touchdowns last week after 3 straight games with 2 touchdowns. He has 6 TDs and 3 picks in 5 road games. He usually lights it up. Megatron's back. You think he's going to light it up, but just when you think the over's a lock, I don't know. I think it's going to be a little bit of a tougher game. He's going to get 1 or 2. They have to even compete with New England.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. But I think this is going to show what Stafford's made of this week. We're going to see what type of fantasy quarterback he really is.
Yeah, he's been sitting at the bottom of tier 3 pretty much all year. This offense hasn't really been getting it done, but he is just good enough to play where you're going to play him most weeks anyways. Because after this, look at this. Tier 4 is starting with Josh McCown.
Yikes.
Then you got Ryan Tannehill, Kyle Orton, and Eli Manning.
Poor Eli. He used to be a tier 1 guy a couple years ago. Now he's lucky to be in any of our tiers.
Yeah, he's going to have his good weeks still. It's not like he's that terrible. Yeah, he threw 5 interceptions last week. But he only had 2.
He's not that bad.
Yeah, he had a terrible game. But he only threw 2 interceptions in his previous 7 games. And he had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions against Dallas in Week 7. So he could have a big game. Both him and Tony Romo had big games against each other not long ago. So he's not a terrible play. But, Dallas is a good defense. It's hard to trust them. Tier 5.
My favorite quarterback ever. The butt fumble. Joe Flacco. Andy Dalton. Sean Hill. And RGT5 now.
RGT5 now,
It doesn't ring as well as T3, but he definitely deserves to be in 5.
Yeah, listen, he's going into San Francisco now, who lets up the 4th fewest of fantasy quarterbacks. And he looked like garbage last week versus Tampa Bay. So
he's been garbage since after his first season, since his rookie year. He's a straight-up Obi-Wan jabroni.
Well, he has been playing injured pretty much his whole career, hasn't he?
Other than his rookie year.
Yeah, exactly.
He needs to not use that as an excuse. Man up, chop your leg off, jam a broomstick in there, and go out and play football.
Joe Flacco has a pretty good matchup. He's going in the New Orleans. They let up the 7th most of fantasy quarterbacks. But he's been up and down all season, and he only has 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in his last 4 games since having that big 5 TD game at Tampa.
Right.
You got to remember, that's at Tampa. So, really, he's not someone you can really trust.
He might put up big points. The Saints are going to put up big points, hopefully at home, because I hate Baltimore and I want them to lose. So you think to be able to compete in that game that they're going to be throwing the football.
Yeah, that's pretty much why he's here. Tier 6, Ryan Mallett, Drew Stanton, Michael Vick, and Zach Mettenberger.
Looks like I was at least kind of right about Ryan Mallett. Maybe he had a big game. Not a huge game, but a decent game for a first-time start in the NFL. And it seems like maybe having no tape on the guy and nothing to really study on him might have helped him out a little bit.
Another guy I want to look at here is Drew Stanton. He's going into Seattle, so this is a terrible matchup
Ooh,
for him.
the 12th man. Dun, dun, dun.
But listen, he threw for 306 yards and 2 TDs against one of the best defenses in the league last week in Detroit. But he only completed 25 of 55 passes in 2 road games this year. He has no touchdowns in both those 2 road games. So I'm saying he has a very bad game this week.
Yeah, we said when Palmer went down that the one bad thing about Stanton is his low completion percentage, and especially on the road, he struggles. If Arizona wants to go anywhere in the playoffs, he needs to get that up. And if he wants to make it up to your tier 2 or 3, which, is the respectable quarterbacks, in my opinion, he needs to step up. You hear that, Stanton? You want to get in Dash's T3? Need to step it up.
Although you're supposed to win a Super Bowl for me.
Please believe.
Tier 7, Blake Bortles, Brian Hoyer, and Teddy Bridgewater.
Blake Bortles didn't do what I thought he could do this year. I thought he was going to do a little bit better. He's thrown a lot of picks. He has at least 1 INT in all 8 games played. He has a total of 14. But he did have 223 yards and 2 TDs in 1/2 against Indianapolis in his NFL debut.
That's when he looked good and we all had hopes for him. But since then, he's been all downhill pretty much.
Yeah.
But Indy's defense hasn't been playing as well recently, so...
He has no weapons around him either, the poor guy.
Well, his best weapon, in my opinion, was Allen Robinson, and he has a foot injury, and he's done for the season, so that really hurts. That's about it. Let's move on.
All right, what about some tight ends?
All right, we have Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski, and Julius Thomas. Greg Olsen is on a bye.
Thomas is 50-50 to play, right?
Yep, 50-50 to
Got
play
a little
right now.
dinged up last week. Who were they playing?
Who were they playing? Johnny Parlay said they were playing Oakland, I remember, but
Okay.
that was wrong.
He was wrong?
Yeah.
Well, he's wrong a lot. Look at his pick segment.
But anyways, yeah, if Julius Thomas doesn't play, take a look at Jacob Tamme. We'll talk about him in a minute, but that is a great fill-in for people who have Julius Thomas and need someone else to play. Tier 2, Antonio Gates moved down to Tier 2 from Tier 1 this week.
Snap.
Yeah, he has just 8 targets and 60 yards over his past 2 games, but with this short list of tight ends, he's still a guy you're going to have to start.
Well, Gates has 9 TDs. That's second among tight ends in the league behind Thomas's 12. So he's getting it done early in the year. But like you said, the last 2 games, the targets just really haven't been there.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what people expected all year. The other guy in this tier is Martellus Bennett going up against Tampa Bay. He hasn't played too well recently either. He's starting to tail off. But again, this tight end class is so depleted. He's another guy you're just going to have to stick in there.
These tight ends are getting so bad. We're only going to have 4 tiers total. The elite, the must-starts, a couple guys that are all right, and the rest who are just garbage.
Starting with Tier 3 here. Larry Donnell, Kobe Fleener, and Jason Witten. Actually, all 3 of these guys aren't too bad. Donnell, he has a great matchup this week going against Dallas, who is a pretty good defense, but they're not good against tight ends. They let up the second most of fantasy tight ends, and he has 6 or more targets in all but 2 games this season. He has 2 TDs in his last 3 games, and in Week 7 versus Dallas, he had 7 catches for 90 yards.
I like Fleener going up against the Jaguars. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to tight ends. He had 7 for 144 last week and 4 for 77 and a touchdown the game before. Dwayne Allen, it's Dwayne Allen, right?
Dwayne Allen.
Dwayne Allen, he's out. He's got 18 targets over the past 2 games, so this looks like a good matchup.
Yeah, I really like this matchup. In fact, I picked him up and put him in my fantasy lineup this week.
That's it. If you put him in your
big
team,
game.
that means he's the best tight end of all time, so you might as well just pick him up and put him in, folks.
Jason Witten's getting better too, and he's definitely deserving of this Tier 3 status.
Old man, T3.
Tier 4, Owen Daniels, Charles Clay, Jacob Tamme, Niles Paul.
Niles Paul, I don't even know who that guy is. You're pulling mad dudes out of your hat now.
Well, as you noticed, you didn't hear the name Jordan Reed this week because he is out, and Niles Paul is the guy that's in. Yes, he's going into San Francisco, but they're not that great against fantasy tight ends. And he started the season with 47 fantasy points through his first 3 games, but he hasn't hit double digits since, mostly because Jordan Reed has been the main tight end. But with Reed out, I like Niles Paul here. Tier 5, Delaney Walker, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Cal Rudolph, and Mercedes Lewis, who was activated from the IR this week.
That's an interesting point there. Mercedes Lewis, he was always a pretty good tight end. He's a big guy. He's mobile. He's good in the red zone. He could be a safety net for Bortles against Indianapolis if he can play.
Yeah, Clay Harbor, he started out well, but after his first 3 or 4 games, he was getting nothing done. He became irrelevant in that offense. Mercedes Lewis has shown he can get it done, and this is a good matchup for him at Indy, who lets up the 4th most to fantasy tight end. So that is a good fill-in tight end for this week, I think.
Get some.
Tier 6, Zach Ertz, Jared Cook, and Jermaine Gresham.
Jared Cook going up against San Diego. They give up the 3rd fewest points to fantasy tight ends. Cook had 4 receptions or less in all but 1 game this season and 3 receptions or less in 5 straight. His lone TD this year did come in his last road game. With Sean Hill quarterback, though, you never know. Cook could be, putting up some better numbers here because of my boy Austin Davis lost his job.
Yeah, that's the one wild card is Sean Hill. How well is he going to play moving forward? Jared Cook is a better tight end than this, but he's just not getting it done, so you can't really play him right now unless you're in a deep league. Tier 7, Scott Chandler, John Carlson, and Vernon Davis, who has been a complete bust this
VD,
season.
we're just going to call him VD because that dude's like a disease. He's ruining himself. He's ruining the offense. When he dominates, Kaepernick was dominating, Crabtree was playing good, Bolden was dominating. Life was good. Gore was getting 1,000 yards. Now he does nothing. San Francisco's struggling, and he's just crying like a little baby.
Yeah, 2 catches in his last 2 games. How terrible is that? He has...
And Heath Miller's washed up.
Yeah, and Heath Miller's washed up.
Where's he at?
He
should
lasted
be in T7.
A lot longer than VD.
Please believe.
Tier 8, Eric Ebron, Tim Wright, Jason Morrow.
Wright, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Wright has a good game for a tier 8 type player because I think Detroit's really going to focus on Gronk this week, and they're going to run these 2 tight end sets. Detroit has a good defense. They might slow Gronkowski down, and that's going to leave Wright open. He's going to be able to sneak in the back door and maybe get a couple big catches, even a touchdown this week.
Well, if he gets a catch, he's going to get a touchdown. Listen, he has, in his past 7 games, he's either scored a TD or had 0 catches. That's just
He's like Martavis Bryant, dude. I think they're related.
It's just ridiculous. But 2 of the games he did score TDs, he only had 1 catch. So really, he's a red zone target. And if you're in a deep league and your tight ends are injured and there's nothing out there, Tim Wright could very well. He has a 50-50 chance of getting you a touchdown.
Well, let's talk about some defenses here for Week 12. We got San Diego versus St. Louis. The Dallas Cowboys at New York Giants, the Baltimore Ravens at New Orleans, the Jets at Buffalo, which is actually going to be at Detroit now because of the 10 feet of snow they got in Buffalo,
right.
And Chicago versus Tampa Bay.
Yeah, so do you like any of these? It was a tough week to pick out some sleeper defenses.
I like Dallas going against the Giants. Eli has shown me nothing. I know you said he had an alright game the last time they played them. It's a division game. I don't know. Dallas is really making a push for the playoffs. I think this is the year that they get the high seed. They get the bye week. I think they're going to win this game pretty handedly. And I think Eli might throw another 3 or 4 picks, maybe even 2 to the end zone. I mean, he's just having a terrible year. I have no faith in that guy this year.
And Dallas's D has turned it on in fantasy the past 2 weeks. They've scored double digits in each of those 2 weeks. They had 6 sacks, 4 forced turnovers, and a TD over the past 2 games. And like you said, Eli Manning 5 picks last week. It's not looking good for him, so that could be a good play. The most surprising one I found that I like is Baltimore at New Orleans. New Orleans giving up the 11th fewest fantasy points to team defenses, but I still like this matchup because Baltimore's defense has been getting it done pretty much all season long. They haven't had less than 9 fantasy points since week 3, and they've been getting it done versus pretty good offenses too. They had 18 points versus Atlanta, and they had 13 points in Indianapolis, so there's no reason they can't do well against New Orleans.
Who's struggling this year.
Yeah, they're struggling. Their offensive line hasn't been playing well this season, and Baltimore's been getting to the ball more recently, so I sort of like that play.
I hate Baltimore, but I'll take your word for it. Well, that wraps up our fantasy segment for Week 12 for quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses. Thanks, Dash, for sitting in. Thanks, fans, for listening. Any fantasy needs you have, tweet us at bet_the_spread. Hit us up on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Listen to these fantasy segments, man. I'm telling you, you want to win your games, this is where it's at. J-Fantasy all day. The fantasy manager of all time.
Playoffs are starting soon, so do work.
Later.